You're listening to The Real Short Box, a comic book podcast made for geeks by geeks.
Hello, everybody out there in podcast land, and thank you for coming out and listening to The Real Short Box. My name is Donald.
And my name is Supreme Chancellor Kevin.
And, of course, Darren, the educator.
Wait a minute. Supreme Chancellor?
Yes.
I didn't know we were doing names again.
Sir, we do names almost every other podcast.
I want to be like Captain Donald.
I don't know, it's this Star Wars fall theme kind of thing. I think he's really digging that, you know.
So can I be like Palpatine?
Well, actually...
Or is that a thing?
That's kind of a thing. It's funny. One of my coworkers actually just out of the blue called me Supreme Chancellor Kevin a few weeks ago. I said, you know what, I'm going to use that.
Oh, he was probably thinking that you were an asshole, and he was just calling you a name.
No, I don't think so.
No? Okay.
He finds me to be an honorable man.
Well,
I think you have false confidence, sir.
We're gonna move on from this here, and we've got a very special surprise for you all out there in comic book land. We have a gentleman here by the name of David Prepose. He is here to talk a little bit about a comic book, a couple comic book series that he created here, some indie series that we actually stumbled upon
and
enjoyed very much at Long Beach Comic Con. David, could you introduce yourself? Say hello to everybody out there.
Hi, I'm David Prepose, and I'm the writer of Spencer and Locke 2, and Going to the Chapel, all at Action Lab Comics.
All right.
Outstanding. Well, David, hello. It's Darren here. So usually the way we kind of run these interviews, I like to really ask some questions about your past here to kind of really just kind of see where you're from and what you're all about. So from my research that I did, it says you're originally from St. Louis, correct?
That's correct.
All right. Which part of St. Louis by chance?
Yeah, in the suburbs. I grew up on the Chesterfield-Creve Coeur border.
Okay. Just a fun little fact, not that anyone cares. I'm a big St. Louis Cardinal fan. Are you too?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, I like it when my sports teams win. And, you know, I grew up with a lot of that as far as the Cardinals were concerned. Not so much the Rams. They wound up following me out here to L.A.
You balled them.
No, I love St. Louis. Grew up, you know, eating St. Louis-style pizza and toasted ravioli and Fitz's root beer. So I always try to see if any one of those companies would ever be interested in doing a comic sponsorship. So far, no bites, but hope springs eternal.
Way to give back, my friend. Okay, so according to a bio I read of yours, it said that you started with DC. I was curious, what did you do there?
Sure. I was an intern in their editorial department. And so I worked on books like Final Crisis, Batman R.I.P., Green Lantern Secret Origin.
Oh, there we go.
It was a really wonderful experience, and it was a great way to kind of get my foot in the door as far as the greater comic book industry was concerned. I think a lot of people, when they're fans of comics and just more on the casual level, I think it's easy to see comics as being made by committee, where it's sort of, you think it's almost like a greeting card where there's like a whole lot of different people talking and coming together to form one story. And that is true to an extent, but it's more, there are individual components that come together to make a comic. There's the writer, there's the artist, or sometimes it's split in terms of penciler and inker. There's the colorist, there's the letterer, there's the editor. But then there's even the different sort of corporate staffers, publicity, marketing, sales, production.
Right. A lot of pieces go into it for sure.
Parts.
Yeah. It's amazing. People don't know that, and it's always a surprise, I think, when you come across somebody that has no clue, and it's always nice and refreshing to be able to kind of let them in on it and just watch their jaw kind of drop a little bit.
Yeah.
Real quick question for you. Since you did work at DC, obviously you have to have a favorite, I would imagine, as far as like a character. Who is your favorite DC Comics character?
Oh, it's Shazam, Billy Batson, no question.
Nice.
That's interesting.
I think Billy Batson should be the most popular superhero of the DC universe. And, knock on wood, someday I'd love to help make him that guy. I think out of all of the characters, I think DC tends to run more mythological and iconic than Marvel's characters, which I think are a little bit more naturalistic and down to earth. But I think Billy really straddles those two extremes nicely. He's a kid who's bequeathed with these godlike powers. And I think his arc is seeing how this genuinely sweet, well-meaning, but naive kid grows up both into those powers and as an adult himself.
David, not to brag or anything, but I was at San Diego Comic-Con, and I happened to win a Shazam fanny pack at the outdoor carnival. Yeah, so I guess you can be a little jealous if you want.
I am a little bit. Yeah. I mean, there's not many things that would make me get the fanny pack out of retirement, but if it was Billy Batson, I'd probably do it.
Yeah,
there you go.
rock that.
So a couple more things here. It says that you also were an employee at some point for CBS, Netflix, and Universal. Anything that you've done there that you'd be willing to share?
Sure. Well, the largest part of my tenure was at CBS. I spent about 5 years, maybe a little bit more than 5 years, working in their New York office. I worked with their publicity teams. And so I worked on every single CBS show. I was sort of the point of contact for all the different publicists for each individual show. And it was a really, it's funny because I think a lot of people, they turn their nose up at CBS. They think that they're, that it's skewed towards an older audience or sort of a much more common denominator kind of storytelling. But the thing that I really learned from CBS is watching, what does it take to make a book or make a piece of entertainment not just accessible, but what are the other variables that go into it besides what's on the screen or what's on the page? You have to look at things like who's starring in it, who's drawing it, an example for a comic. What's it going up against? What's the timing of such an entertainment? What kind of marketing and publicity push are you putting behind it? There's a lot that goes into it.
So you got
it was really eye-opening for me jumping to comics.
So you got a big kind of a background in the marketing, and so maybe in this way you got a bit of a leg up as far as like when it comes to your own comic book series that you're doing now. You know that you have to get out there, you have to promote it, and maybe certain ways to do that some other people might not because of what you've done in the past, which is good.
Absolutely. I mean, the thing is, I also got my start once I finished at DC. Based on the timing, people remember when Batman and R.I.P. and Final Crisis and Green Lantern Secret Origin came out. It was right as the recession was hitting its peak, and I just graduated college. There were obviously no jobs available. And so I wound up working as a reviewer at Newsarama for the better part of a decade. And I think being able to take these different elements, whether it's working as a reviewer and sort of learning the comic book press landscape, or working publicity at CBS, or actually my first job when I finished at DC, my first full-time job, I was actually a crime and politics reporter for a newspaper. And I feel like at the time it felt like I was going into a bit of a zigzag. I didn't really know where I was going to wind up. And looking back on it, I think you hit it right on the head. These were all experiences that I needed in order to be able to hit the ground running the way that my books have. I needed all these experiences, some of them as heartbreaking as they were, to better prepare me for better times down the road.
I can definitely see that in your writing.
Well, and David, also the last thing I want to mention here is I did get an opportunity to look at your Twitter account, and if I may quote one of your tweets here, update from the Emmy party, a lot of people here look like celebrities.
Yeah, this one I'm very fortunate. My girlfriend, my partner, she actually is a journalist in her own right. She covers the event planning industry. So I was the plus one for this particular event. We went to the Disney Emmys after party, and it was super fun. It's always a great opportunity to dress up. You get to see some celebrities. I saw Jeff Goldblum. I saw Keegan-Michael Key. I saw two of the kids from This Is Us. It was fun. You know, I haven't been in Los Angeles that long. I only moved out here about 3 years ago, and it's been, you know, it's a culture shock, especially moving from New York. But getting to go to events like that, it's always very fun.
Yeah, no, and you know, I actually worked on the pilot of Key and Peele, and I can attest that Keegan-Michael Key is a very nice, friendly gentleman, and I'm glad you had an opportunity to, you know, at least see him or hang out.
I remember distinctly hearing his wife say, "I'm wearing sneakers right now, but don't worry, they're Gucci." And I was like, "Hero, you're a hero." So yeah, it was super fun. You know, got to talk to one of the Emmy nominees. Something, I believe it was sound mixing for What We Do in Shadows. So yeah, it was
Nice.
You know, it's a fun experience. I got to go to the Golden Globes earlier this year. You know, knock on wood, maybe one of these days we'll get to go to the Oscars. Maybe even for one of my books. We'll see.
That would be great.
I'm gonna kick you off to one of these other guys. I know they're just itching to ask you some questions.
Because speaking of, you know, one of your books, I just finished up the first chapter of Going to the Chapel.
Yeah.
And that one was very, actually, I was really, you know, when you interview people with you know, that have ideas and stuff, you always want the best for that person, and I feel like you're on the right path. This is some good stuff.
Thank you.
The first thing I noticed was Phil Spector. That was interesting. I was like, oh, okay, so and then I realized it's because of the song Chapel of Love.
Right. Yeah, no, it was a very weird thing. I felt I had that same sort of double take because I had to go through Hal Leonard to secure the rights to use the lyrics for that song.
Yeah.
And at the time, you know, you're just you're saying, this is the song, these are the song lyrics. You know, you're not even thinking, you're thinking, oh, you know, go into the chapel, buy the Dixie Cups, because they're the ones who sung it. And then you get the contract back, and you're like, oh, Phil Spector, okay. You know, yes, I definitely had a very similar double take when I saw that.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, thankfully the process was actually fairly painless. You know, I sent them the script for the first issue. They approved it. They sent me the contract. I paid them a couple $100 to use the rights.
Oh,
and,
I would assumed you would have paid them in. I would assumed you would have paid them in combs or fancy wigs of some sort.
Or maybe wampum.
Yeah, possibly.
Yeah.
But a couple $100, that's good. That's actually great. I remember I did a short film, and actually Darren worked on me with this. It was the Birth was the name of it. And we were looking to use a song that we found. And so I reached out to the songwriter. And I was like, hey, I really like your song. I wanted to use it in our short film. And he's like, oh, I'm a big fan of like independent projects and short films. I'll get you the rights for $500. And I was like, that's awesome. That's our whole budget. Thank you. We're going to go another route. but thank you. Legitimately, that was a good deal. But, you know, money's money.
Yeah, it's definitely. I agree. You know, it's one of those things. I didn't pay quite $500. I mean, it was a little less than that. But yeah, from what I understand, they've kind of tightened licensing for songs as far as comics go. My friend Rylan Grant, who writes Aberrant and Banjax over at Action Lab, he uses a lot of song lyrics in his work, and so he was able to kind of walk me through the process of how he secured his stuff.
Oh,
and,
great!
Yeah, it went very smoothly from there.
Yeah, that's really good to have somebody that can walk you through a little bit. That's always nice. That's not always the case, so it's good that happened. Very fortunate.
Hey, David, quick question for you. What movies influenced you on this wedding heist concept?
Well, first of all,
Oh, that's great.
if I can interject real quick, David, if you would give us kind of a breakdown of what exactly Going to the Chapel is about, just give us the overall. Hey, give us the pitch that I think it's what you kind of sold me on when I walked past in Long Beach.
Yeah, well, going to the chapel, I say it's like Die Hard meets Wedding Crashers. It's about a gang of bank robbers that thinks robbing rich people's weddings would be easier than robbing banks, and finding out just how wrong they are. It's like if Quentin Tarantino had a baby with Arrested Development and then chose to bring that baby to a wedding. It's also, it's just a story about a bride grappling with a case of cold feet and becoming sort of this unlikely ringleader of her own hostage situation to get out of walking down the aisle. So, it's sort of an action rom-com with a healthy dose of family dysfunction thrown in for good measure. And I wrote it because I felt like rom-coms get a bad rap in pop culture, not just in the direct market, but I think in today's day and age, a lot of people turn their noses up at rom-coms. They think they're predictable or they're shallow.
How dare
or,
they?
I think... Oh, I'm sorry?
I said, how dare they? Serendipity is one of my favorite movies.
Oh, you got problems.
I love, for me, it's sort of the more tragic, the better. I'm more of a fan of romantic dramedy. I think I like things like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind or About Time. Even ones that haven't quite aged as well, like 500 Days of Summer or Chasing Amy. I mean, when I saw that movie in high school, that movie was really, that really had a big impact on me.
Right.
And so I feel like there are a lot of guys who feel like, my masculinity is being threatened if I say I'd watch a rom-com. And I think a lot of women feel like they can't be respected if they say that they like rom-coms.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I wanted to take kind of a twist on it and do almost like a stealth rom-com. It's this is sort of an action crime comedy first and foremost, but there's that romantic sort of foundation that kind of runs through the whole thing. And I think that's what's so important about romance and rom-coms as genres. I think they're just as flexible as sci-fi and crime and superheroes. It's just, I think the direct market hasn't really taken a chance on it. And for me, that means that's bait. I feel like if nobody's done something, that means I have to try my hand at it. That's what we did with my first book, Spencer and Locke, which we can talk more about later. If it hasn't been done, I need to do it. That's sort of my philosophy as a writer.
And obviously, you're doing it.
Oh no, I was just going to say. So I think we're getting kind of the best of all worlds with this book, and I think it's very unlike anything else you're going to get in the direct market right now.
Yeah, and I agree. And one thing I noticed about some of the characters you have, I definitely like Grandma Anderson. She's very sassy and is very fearless. And Emily is obviously not the ideal bride, where Jesse is the ideal husband. So he's kind of like the perfect guy. And what's realistic about that is he's too perfect. You can tell, especially with the little twist at the end, that Emily kind of may prefer a bad boy.
Well, yeah. I mean, the thing is and this was speaking a little bit about, rom-coms. I think part of the reason why a lot of people turn their noses up at them is they're often, they see them as predictable. You kind of know just based on the poster who somebody's going to wind up with. For me, one of my favorite rom-coms is Bridget Jones's Diary, and it's because you're always kind of up in the air about who's she going to go with. And so that was something I didn't want to give Emily an easy out in this book. I didn't, it would have been, I think a lot of rom-coms would have portrayed her fiance, Jesse, as this like total jerk.
Right.
I wanted to make him, he's a decent guy. Like, he might be a little oblivious to sort of this neon flashing signs of anxiety that Emily has been flashing.
Absolutely.
But by and large, he's just excited.
This kind of reminds me, sorry to cut you off, kind of reminds me just genre-wise of the movie Grosse Pointe Blank. So Grosse Pointe Blank is a very funny romantic comedy, which has elements of action to it that are kind of enjoyable. At least that's what's kind of coming through my mind.
Thank you for saying that. I hadn't thought of that until you said it, but I absolutely see it. This feels like a Cusack movie from the 90s. Absolutely. And I feel like that's a lot of the spirit we were trying to invoke. We were trying to modernize it in a way, just in terms of the pacing and the storytelling. And that's where I think actually, some classic Tarantino really kind of livens things up. When I say I'm a fan of Tarantino, I always have to have some caveats here. I'm not a fan of of blood all over the place Tarantino, or Tarantino using slurs, or Tarantino's foot fetish. What I am saying is, you know, I like Tarantino. I like his ability to sort of balance action and comedy. I love the things that Tarantino does with structure. Apparently, especially in his early works like Reservoir Dogs or Pulp Fiction, but even in the Kill Bill series.
Jackie Brown.
And I in particular, I like the irreverence that he brings to it, and the way that he's able to bring a certain stylishness to the mix. In his case, it's often with kind of a choice needle drop, and that's part of the reason why we started going to chapel with just song lyrics. Is I thought it would be an interesting way to get readers that we'd get them all on the same page immediately, all humming to this song that everybody knows just by cultural osmosis, and sort of a way of lending sound to what is considered a silent medium of comics.
So real quick, you had in there, we talked about there's kind of a gang that comes in and they decide that robbing weddings is easier than robbing banks. That name of that gang is the Bad Elvis Gang. Did you, when you were coming up with ideas, were you like, what if we took the Flying Elvises from Honeymoon in Vegas and they just landed right into a wedding and robbed them?
Funny. I was thinking Point Break. I love Point Break.
with all the presidents. Yeah, the mask.
All right, that works too.
Thinking about the dead, I was thinking about the dead presidents, and I thought that's a gang of bank robbers that I want to do something like that. And I thought, what's the shtick that would work well for a wedding heist? And I thought about a few, and I quickly kind of zoomed in on Elvis. It made me think of the Vegas quickie weddings and the Elvis impersonators there.
Yeah.
But I thought also the way that we could take twists on Elvis. I thought it kind of summed up that irreverent sense of humor we were going for. I mean, we have young Elvis, we have fat Elvis, we have African American Elvis, we have zombie Elvis, and I thought that was funny.
And the names
I
too.
felt like that summed up so much of the tone of what we were going for with Chapel. Where, it's a little irreverent, it's a little stylish, it's a little badass, it's a little funny, it's a little suave, when you look at it, with the right squint.
Yep.
That's all the kinds of emotions we wanted in this book. And, I love the Bad Elvis Gang. They've been such a fun group of characters to write, as is Emily and her extended family.
Right.
And so,
sorry, just 1
it's
second.
very easy to fall in love with them.
Yeah, real quick, just to wrap up on this particular book, is this going to be an ongoing series or a limited series going to the chapel?
My thought is I never want to keep readers on the hook any longer than they have to be. Both of our first 2 volumes of Spencer and Locke were each 4 issues a pop.
Right.
And that will be the case as well with Chapel.
Okay.
If I can tell the story in 4 issues, I'd like to. It means we don't have any fat. It's a little cheaper in your wallet, as is mine. It's a little lighter in my sanity. But it's one of the. I never say never. This comes back to my newspaper training, because I tend to write modularly, where I will write a storyline thinking, okay, if this is all we've got, what's the story I'm burning to tell? I have to tell. But I always have ideas in my back pocket, thinking, okay, if people really love this book, what would a sequel look like? What would a spinoff look like? And that worked out really well with Spencer and Locke. And I always say, if the father of the bride can pull off a part 2, who's to say we can't?
Oh, absolutely.
Well, they did get it made.
That's true, they did. Now, getting to Spencer and Locke, the 2 volumes you have there, I have to say, it's a very interesting writing there. I'm very impressed. I liked how you had those juxtaposition between what's going on in real life and also those panels that reminds me of the newspaper print, kind of like the Calvin and Hobbes and Beetle Bailey type feel, and also just basically the basic noir feel.
And to bounce off that, I really want to give credit also to the artists. Jorge Santiago Jr.
Yes, well done.
Was fantastic as far as bouncing between the imaginary realm, from flashbacks and stuff in the real life, as well as the colors by Jason Smith. I thought that was fantastic. The palette that was chosen for this kind of a neo-noir imaginary realm. It was just very well done.
Yes.
Well, I first off, thank you for saying that. And, George and Jason, they both earned, Ringo Award nominations for their work on Spencer and Locke Volume 1.
Well-deserved.
It was well-deserved. George getting a nomination for Best Covers, Jason for Best Colors. Actually, our letterer, Colin Bell, was nominated for Best Lettering. And actually, I was nominated for Best Writer last year.
Oh, congratulations, sir.
Was nominated for Best Series. So it's been a crazy run with Spencer and Locke. I feel like every kind of possible benchmark we could hit with this book, we've hit so far. The only thing we're missing is an Eisner nom, and
it's coming.
Knock on wood, maybe someday.
I think it's coming.
Well, actually, I could say an Eisner nom and a third volume, and fingers crossed. We may have some stuff to share sooner rather than later in that front.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure you do.
But yeah, no, I mean, the secret to my success, I always say, is I work with really, really talented art teams. Because at that point, then it doesn't really matter what I write.
Right.
The art looks terrific.
They bring stories to life.
You might think that.
Real quick though, can you give us a little bit of a kind of a background as far as the storyline is concerned for Spencer and Locke?
Yeah, Spencer and Locke. The easy log line for this: it's what if Calvin and Hobbes grew up in Sin City? It's about a hard-boiled detective whose partner is his childhood imaginary friend. So it's a little True Detective, it's a little Fight Club, and it's 100% a love letter to classic Bill Watterson and Frank Miller.
Absolutely.
So the first volume of Spencer and Locke follows hard-boiled detective Locke and his partner, who happens to be a 7-foot-tall talking panther named Spencer, and they're investigating the murder of Locke's childhood sweetheart, Sophie Jenkins, who is sort of our Susie Durkins analog for the book. And
she's kind of the MacGuffin in a way too.
I'm sorry?
I said in some ways she's kind of the MacGuffin in a way.
In certain ways, and as they go through this investigation in their old neighborhood, we find out what would drive an adult cop to still hold on to this childhood imaginary friend, and we find out it's because his upbringing was so abusive and traumatic and awful that was sort of his coping mechanism. This was his defense method for a hostile world outside that he was so alone in, was he created his own best friend.
Exactly. And I'm sorry.
I'm sorry?
Oh, I'm sorry. All I was going to say was, Spencer, this character, Locke, this is like a really deep character study. When you just read all these issues, you really learn and really get deeply invested into the character itself. He's kind of like on the edge of madness in many respects.
Yeah.
But he's still a decent guy.
Absolutely. And that kind of led us to our sequel, Spencer and Locke 2, which just recently wrapped. Our trade paperback collection came out in August. And we took the Fables approach for Volume 2. So we did every comic strip. No comic strip is safe. So we pit our hard-boiled Calvin and Hobbes parody against a hardcore Beetle Bailey.
Yes.
Roach Riley was our villain's name. I've always described him as Heath Ledger's Joker by way of the Deer Hunter.
Oh, God.
And,
I was about to say that about the Joker.
I had such a blast.
I'm sorry? Okay, yeah, no, it's interesting. Like when you mentioned the Deer Hunter, it's one of my favorite scenes in there is when Robert De Niro's talking to Chris Walken. He's like, yeah, those guys over there, my other friends, they're great guys, but they're a bunch of assholes. Nicky, you're the genuine man. You're the real man. You're the great man. I just love that scene, man. I'm sorry. That's all I got out of that movie.
Plus Roach Riley, in some respects, is kind of the mirror image of Locke. They both have these similar things going on in their heads.
Yeah. Well, without spoiling too much, I mean, There's more to Roach than meets the eye.
Right.
But,
Absolutely.
I wanted, Spencer and Locke, their method of doing business is they're the wrecking ball. They're a blunt instrument. They're the ones who they won't stop until they save the day, and that's kind of the secret to their success. And so I thought for Volume 2, what happens when they fight somebody that isn't going to back down? Somebody who, in many ways, is sort of the immovable object to their unstoppable force. And so, yeah, Roach is very much kind of this mirror opposite of Locke. Locke is, he's very disillusioned and and he's kind of on the ropes. We start in volume 2. He's on suspension from internal affairs based on all the rough justice he had to dispense in the first volume. And
A little Dirty Harry justice.
Locke is grappling with a lot of internal demons, especially after the first volume. First volume he confronts a lot of the tormentors of his past, and in volume 2 he realizes that doesn't make him feel any better. He's still just as kind of broken and damaged as he was before, but now he has no direction.
Right.
And Roach, on the other hand, I like to think he suffered just as much pain and suffering as Locke, but in a much more accelerated time frame.
And matter of fact, Roach talked about pain.
On the battlefield.
Yeah, matter of fact, Roach talked a lot about pain.
I'm sorry to cut you off here, but we're just limited in time here. That's a very excellent breakdown of Spencer and Locke, and I'm everyone should be looking forward to volume 2 there for sure. That's out. So I wanted to go back to your going to the chapel real quick, because I have a quiz question for you, and bear in mind there are no wrong answers, except there might be. So you said that Die Hard heavily inspired this. I must ask you, there are a bunch of films that came out afterwards that were like clones of Die Hard. And I must ask you, what is the best of the Die Hard clones?
Oh, man, that's tough. I mean, I guess Die Hard with a Vengeance, since technically it wasn't supposed to be a Die Hard movie.
Right.
I mean, I guess I'm going to flip your question on its ear a little bit, because the movie that really inspired this, I say Die Hard because most people have seen Die Hard. It's really Dog Day Afternoon.
Oh, wow. Okay.
We go back to the 70s. There we go.
Okay, yeah.
I love that movie. But a lot of people don't know that movie, and Die Hard is kind of a close enough cousin based on the action that we're dealing with that I mentioned that. But yeah, Dog Day Afternoon.
Look at that.
Death at a Funeral.
Flipping it on you, Darren.
Those are the movies.
By the way, the correct answer there was Under Siege with Steven Seagal.
That's funny. Yeah, I could appreciate that one.
Yeah, I would have went with The Last Boy Scout myself, but we all
not
have
a Die Hard clone.
We all have our choices.
Oh, you like Turbulence. That would have been your choice.
Actually, I do love Turbulence is a Christmas movie. I don't care what you say. I watch it every year. David, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, and we're looking very much forward to seeing you soon at an upcoming convention. Speaking of which, you're going to be at a few, I believe, correct?
I'll be at New York Comic Con next week, followed by LA Comic Con the following week, and Baltimore Comic Con the week after that.
Okay, so you're going to be at New York, LA, and Baltimore?
He's traveling.
Yeah. Busy.
And I definitely want to buy the physical
back and
copies.
forth across country.
Oh, well, what is the best way for people to get access to information about your content?
Sure. Well, they can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at PeposD, and they can go into the chapel on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Go to the Chapel, and Spencer and Locke on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at, you guessed it, Spencer and Locke, just one word, all spelled out.
Okay, great. We'll make sure to share those on our social sites. Thank you very much.
Yes, and thank you so much for being on with us, David. We very much appreciate it, and we appreciate your work. So thank you for your time.
And I definitely want to pick up some of the physical copies of these books as well.
Yeah, so we'll be seeing you in the future, and we'll be grabbing our own copies.
They can pre-order going to the chapel still at their local comic shop. They can pre-order issues 2 and 3. Right now, issue 2 is available through the 30th with the codes AUG 1914 82, 83, and 84. And issue 3 they can pre-order with the code SEP for September 19, 13, 67, 68, and 69.
All right,
outstanding. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, David. You have a good night. We appreciate you reaching out to us, and we very much appreciate your work. So thank you.
Thank you. You guys have a good night.
All right, you too. Take care.
And speaking of a really awesome place, you can get some comic books. How about Spiro's Heroes?
Oh, sorry to interrupt, everyone. Just wanted to mention real quick about a shop in Canoga Park, California called Spiro's Heroes. Elliot, the proprietor of the store, has over 300,000 books in what's called the Temple of Comics. That's Spiro Heroes in Canoga Park, spirosheroes.com.
Wow, what a wonderful way to end a podcast. Out on an advertisement for an amazing comic shop like that.
Yeah.
The Temple of Comics.
Wow, look at Kevin, my nipples are hard. Can you feel them? Feel them.
No, sir, I don't want to be doing that.
Oh, come on, feel it. Feel
No,
right there,
no.
right there. Give me your
Save
hand.
that-
Give me your
save-
hand.
no,
Give me
save
your,
that for
give me
someone
your
else.
hand.
Save that for
Oh,
someone
there
else.
you go. Grab
Save it
that.
for someone else.
I'll tell you, David's a great person to interview. He gives a lot of context to his stories, and he's very thorough. So, readers, if you pick up his stuff and you listen to this interview along with it, you are really going to be pleased with how well you understand his material.
And in my opinion, David has a bright future ahead of him in comic book writing and perhaps even in other media.
And a heck of a nice guy.
Absolutely.
Yes. So thanks again, David. And thank you all, too, for coming out and listening to this podcast about David's work. We really can get behind it. I think it's some really solid stuff, guys.
I think there's a good chance if he continues going where he's going, some of this stuff might be picked up for development.
Yeah, could be picked up for development, and you'll be seeing his name in the credits.
No, and once again, you will be able to come back and listen to this interview anytime you want.
Right.
Where was David before he blew up all over the world?
Right. And if you don't hear him on a future podcast anywhere else, perhaps maybe you'll see him, or you'll see us, or maybe we'll see you
At the comic shop.
Yeah!
This has been The Real Short Box. We'll see you at the comic shop. Thanks for listening.